Finally, the long-awaited episode 6 of the 5th season of The Boys has premiered, and now the calm is truly over and the storm has begun. There is no turning back, the most terrifying part is only just beginning. As is customary on the channel, we're going straight into the summary and explained ending of the episode. Episode 6 of The Boys is out. The boys are still searching for Compound V1. With time against them and Homelander becoming increasingly unstable, they turn to the Legend for help. The former Vote media mogul tells them to look for Bombsight, a veteran superhero who belonged to the first generation of Supes created with the original variants of the compound. According to the Legend, the only person who still matters to Bombsight is Golden Geisha, the woman he has loved for years, and she is the key to drawing him out. This revelation immediately changes the course of the mission because it stops being just about locating information on V1 and becomes an emotionally delicate operation in which the boys must manipulate the last human bond left to a man broken by decades of war, experiments, and abandonment. The team heads to a Vote nursing home where Golden Geisha now lives among elderly former superheroes, a place where Vote's once glamorous icons have been reduced to age, fragility, and oblivion. The series uses this setting to completely dismantle the heroic fantasy built by Vote for decades. Golden Geisha stands out among them all because despite the passage of time, she remains Bombsight's only real emotional tie to the world, making her a crucial piece in the boys' strategy. Kimiko Miyashiro, surrounded by harmless elderly people, feels empathy and doesn't want to resort to brute force against them. But since this is the boys, they are forced to go to those extremes, although to a lesser extent so as not to really hurt them. Even so, the situation gets out of control when some of the residents try to intervene or protect Golden Geisha, forcing the team to improvise and use limited force to complete the mission. As a result, they manage to kidnap Golden Geisha in order to lure Bombsight, but the moment doesn't feel like a victory, but rather another moral line crossed by the group in their desperation to stop Homelander before he obtains V1. On the other hand, the rumors that Sister Sage would betray Homelander came true. She has finally formed an alliance with the boys, and to gain their trust, she reveals part of her plan to stop Homelander. Sage explains that she underestimated Homelander's obsession with V1, and now understands that if he manages to stabilize the compound in his body, the world will enter an irreversible stage of absolute domination. Although Butcher and the rest distrust her, they agree to work together because they know they need her intelligence to stay ahead of Homelander and Soldier Boy's moves. This alliance completely changes the group's dynamic, as it introduces someone who thinks several steps ahead of everyone else, but whose loyalty remains uncertain. The bait works almost immediately. Bombsight appears furious and desperate. He is not presented as an arrogant threat, but as a terrified man facing the possibility of losing the last bit of love he has left, since it turns out Bombsight has loved Golden Geisha his entire life. Seeing Golden Geisha age while he remained unchanged had driven him to desperately search for a way to stop time, turning his obsession with V1 into something far more emotional than ambitious. For Bombsight, Compound V1 was an opportunity to make his beloved immortal, but she never accepted it, and even now in this situation, she continues to reject him. She tells Bombsight that she doesn't want immortality. She doesn't want an eternal life. What she wants is to enjoy the real time they have left. This conversation becomes one of the most melancholic and human moments of the entire season of The Boys, because it breaks the constant obsession of Supes with transcending, dominating, or surviving eternally. A massive conflict breaks out between Bombsight and Billy Butcher, in which Bombsight seems to have the upper hand and intends to take Golden Geisha with him. However, it is at that moment that Soldier Boy appears. The reunion between Soldier Boy and Bombsight is tense and violent at first, revealing a turbulent past and unresolved resentments, probably linked to their years as part of the first generation of Supes used by Vote. They confront each other not only physically but also emotionally. like two living relics of a brutal era marked by experiments and manipulation. However, the situation calms when Soldier Boy tells Bombsight that if he truly loves Golden Geisha, immortality is not the right answer. Soldier Boy offers him another option: hand over Compound V1, renounce power, and live a finite human life with the woman he loves. Bombsight, wanting to live out the rest of his life with Golden Geisha, accepts a return to a mortal and finite existence, finally making a decision based not on the fear of losing her, but on the desire to share authentic, albeit limited, time with her. After decades obsessed with halting aging and escaping death through the power of Compound V, Bombsight understands that immortality wouldn't truly alleviate his pain, but would instead eternally prolong the distance between them. Soldier Boy understands this and receives Compound V1, using his abilities to evaporate Compound V from Bombsight's body and restore him to a normal human existence. The terrifying moment of the episode comes with the sudden arrival of Homelander, who upon seeing Soldier Boy with Compound V1, approaches imposingly. However, when everyone thought Soldier Boy, who from the beginning of the season showed hatred toward Homelander, would refuse, he ends up voluntarily handing over the V1. The bond between father and son has always been fragile, but seeing Homelander with Stormfront means seeing him linked to the same woman who once shaped Soldier Boy himself. Clara pressured him relentlessly, convinced that power, strength, and legacy were the most important things. Now Soldier Boy faces the fact that she later placed that same belief in Homelander. Soldier Boy is no longer acting solely out of resentment. He decides to put Clara Vogt's vision before his own anger. Despite the ambivalence he still feels toward Homelander, he finally convinces himself that Clara would have wanted him to move forward, not to stagnate. This leads Soldier Boy to decide to hand over the V1 to Homelander, who immediately injects it, achieving supreme power. In an instant, all the boy's efforts to prevent Homelander from obtaining V1 were in vain. The compound they invested so much time in is now in the hands of the being they feared most, and the sense of defeat conveyed by the scene is brutal because it is not just a tactical failure, but the absolute collapse of any hope of maintaining some balance. The group's desperation is evident as they witness Homelander absorbing the compound and beginning to transform in front of them, while the entire environment seems to become more unstable and threatening. Homelander fires beams into the night sky, demonstrating the evolution of his power in a visually terrifying scene that seems to mark the birth of a new version of the character, more powerful, more unhinged, and possibly free of any biological limits. Sister Sage's careful calculations have failed. She thought Soldier Boy would destroy Compound V1, but in the end he handed it over, proving that even the brightest mind can be wrong when trying to predict complex human emotions like legacy, nostalgia, or the need for approval. This mistake completely changes the game board and leaves Sage in an extremely vulnerable position, because much of her strategy depended on avoiding precisely this scenario. With only 2 episodes left, they will be completely explosive, and it will surely be time to say goodbye to one or several of our favorite characters. The sense of impending tragedy intensifies now that Homelander has reached the level of power he always sought, forcing all the remaining characters to face desperate decisions and inevitable sacrifices. On the other hand, regarding other events, we see that the Deep gets caught up in Black Noir's sabotage of a Vought oil pipeline in revenge for Bork's death. The oil spills into the water and destroys much of the marine life. For the Deep, the devastation feels deeply personal, because beyond how ridiculous or pathetic the character has often seemed, his connection to the ocean and marine creatures has always been genuine. Seeing tons of oil destroying entire ecosystems and killing animals he considers practically family finally pushes him to an emotional limit he had never shown before. As a result, the Deep annihilates Black Noir in a surprisingly brutal scene that turns a secondary conflict into a visceral tragedy.